Today's video, I have two special guests on the channel. We have Robin from his channel Bookspin. Thank you for joining, Robin.
Thank you for inviting me.
And Ira from SF Words of Wonder. Thank you for joining.
Yep, thanks.
And we are going to talk about Gene Wolfe's Fifth Head of Cerberus. Awesome. Robin and I both have the SF Masterworks, and Ira's got that's the Tor Essentials, right?
Yeah. No one has the old classic paperback though, so.
Yeah. So I in preparation for this, I wanted to get one of the vintage copies, and so I was checking online, checking eBay, and they're like anywhere from 30 to 50 or more a piece, $30. So they're kind of pricey, those old vintage copies.
Well,
So
sorry, Brandon, perhaps I could just take this moment to thank an anonymous viewer from my channel who actually sent me this from my Amazon wish list.
Oh well.
I got this a few months back, and it includes this Amazon gift note which says, "Enjoy your gift from John V. Marsh." Anyone who's read the book will know that John V. Marsh is one of the central characters.
awesome. That's
So
awesome.
quite mysterious, but thank you to whoever that was.
Gene Wolfe, of course, has a reputation for being a challenging author. And I think most people know him for the Book of the New Sun, of course, his series of books in that collection. This one is, from what I've heard, is not quite as challenging, but it's still, I think you guys will agree, it has its challenges. So the structure is it's told in three novellas, and they're kind of interconnected, and you have to read all three of them to get the full picture for each single one. Like you're not going to get the full picture of the first story until you read the third story and the second, and so on. And they're kind of interchangeable in that respect. Did you guys have that same feeling, Ira?
Yeah, well, originally he wrote the first novella, which is called The Fifth Head of Cerberus. And then he went to a workshop and one of the publishers or editors said, "Man, this is great. You need to write a couple more." So late that same year, he wrote the additional ones. But just thinking about how the first story would read on its own as a complete thing, um, when I finished it, I was like, "Man, that's good." But once you read the other two, it opens that up so much more. So.
Yeah. That's interesting. If you didn't plan that in advance, I wonder.
Yeah, and I don't know if he hadn't planned it, but he had only written the first novella, and then he was kind of helped it, pushed into writing more about this. And there is a theory in there that when somewhere from some fans that he changed some things up when he decided to write the additional two,
Okay.
which kind of adds to some of the mystery and convolution and of the whole thing as a whole.
Robin, how did you feel about the interconnectedness?
Yeah, it's a very interesting structure, isn't it? And each novella, as I'm sure we'll discuss, is very different in its style and its content, but they definitely do interlock with each other. So, yeah, and I think another thing is you could read these three novellas in any order. They're not
Yeah.
chronological, really.
It's almost like a puzzle with the pieces spread out between all three stories.
Yeah, calling it a puzzle though implies that there's a solution. So,
True.
but
True.
so I have this Tor Essentials, and it had an intro by Brian Evanson, and I'll just read really quick. He sums that up perfectly. What we're talking about there. He says, each individual novella clarifies, complicates, and contradicts what the other novellas assert.
Yeah,
So
so
as soon
that
as you start figuring it out and you think back to some of the other novellas, you can find evidence that throws your theories out of the water pretty much.
so yeah, the Masterworks version also has an intro. As far as the intros go, they do provide a lot of the answers. So I think you kind of have to, as a reader, decide how much do you want to know about this before going into it and reading it. See, I read a couple pages of this introduction and I realized he was going to start talking about what was going on, so I stopped and I didn't go back and until after the book and read the rest of the intro. So you kind of I think kind of have to make that determination for yourself because it is challenging. It could, it might help you understand what's going on, but it's also if you want to discover the or try to discover everything for yourself, you might want to wait to read the intro until after.
Core Essentials did the same thing. He talked a lot about the plot.
The SF Masterworks one is written by Adam Roberts, uh, who, in my experience, has written quite a few of the intros for the SF Masterworks series, and they're usually quite short. They're only about 3 pages long, but they are quite interesting, and they do shed a bit of light. I've not actually read any of Adam Roberts' books yet, but he's also an accomplished writer in his own right.
Mm-hmm.
So I think what we're gonna try to do on this video is do kind of the first half like a non-spoiler uh, discussion of the book, kind of a synopsis of each section, maybe go into the world building and characters and that sort of thing. And then the second half go into more the spoilers, the speculation of what's going on. So, and I'll put timestamps down in there so you can kind of skip to whatever section you want. And if you don't want to be spoiled, you don't have to watch that second half. The first novella, of course, is the Fifth Head of Cerberus, which is the name of the book, and it starts out with kind of it's this told from the perspective of a young boy, and he's living in this what I kind of saw as like a big mansion. Almost, I kind of felt like 1800s, 1900s mansion. And I mean, when you first start out reading, there's really no mention of any sorts of technology going on. And then as the story goes, it starts talking about a little more type of things that you'd see more in science fiction. I don't think it mentions the second planet. So there are these two orbiting planets, and we're set on this first story is set on one of them that has colonized by humanity. They came from Earth hundreds of years ago. The second planet is or was once colonized by natives. They may or may not be extinct. And yeah, I don't think it even mentions the second planet until several pages into the story. So it does not give much away. It's about this boy living in this mansion, and he's just kind of living his life. It's kind of I don't know, not really your typical plot, just kind of more of here's this kid's life and how he's living it, how he's growing up, and strange things are going on. But since it's from a boy's perspective, this young boy, he has no idea what's going on around him. He kind of tells how he observes the things that are going on, but like since it's from a young boy's perspective, it's not a very accurate telling of what's actually happening. So there are a lot of hints and secrets and strange all kinds of strange stuff going on. What did you guys I don't know what I missed there? Did I miss anything, Robin?
No, I think that's a good starting point. Obviously, we can talk maybe a bit more spoilers later, but yeah, I think the first story is a kind of memoir of this boy in his. I think he's like an adolescent, teenager, whatever, and it kind of starts off in a sort of Proustian fashion. I think even the first sentence is basically a spin on the opening sentence of In Search of Lost Time. So it's got some similar kind of themes in a way, like the nature of identity and memory. Uh, and yeah, there are some quite interesting and unusual characters. I don't know if we want to go into that just yet.
I mean, he's got his brother David, and I don't think we ever know the name of the main character.
Yes,
Uh,
that's another thing.
but he's got
Yeah,
his younger brother. I think it's a younger brother, David. He's got Mr. Million, which is kind of like a butler type caretaker for the house. And then he's got his father who he doesn't really know anything about his father at all, and his father will like bring him into these like sessions where he interviews him and talks to him and stuff. But other than that, he doesn't really interact with his father at all.
Yeah,
Um,
as a child, he didn't, and then there was a moment when him and his brother got pulled in, and his dad starts kind of experimenting on them in a way, running them through all these different weird tests and drugging them, and yeah, it gets kind of bizarre.
And let's see, there are some mentions sprinkled in of the natives on the other planet. They're thought to be extinct, but I mean, in this story, like it's not your typical science fiction where like these are aliens. Here's what they look like. We're going to describe them. It's just kind of hints about them, and yeah, I mean, it's a
Yeah.
very interesting story. Very, I mean, you really got to be focused when you're reading it. It's a challenging, kind of challenging narrative.
And I think you're right. The most of the beginning feels like kind of a slice of life, and then at one point, pretty early on, you get this the big catch or whatever you want to call it, where you find out that there's someone who has this hypothesis called Vale's hypothesis that these aliens that were on the other planet. And I don't even think this is spoiler territory. I think this is the hook of this. I don't know if do you guys agree.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So yeah, so the thing that hooked me is when you find out what the Vale's hypothesis is, and these aliens were on the other planet, which was Saint Anne, and we're on Saint Croix, and the aliens were never on Saint Croix. And when human settlers came to St. Anne, they supposedly wiped out this alien civilization completely, and they're almost a mythical alien entity at this point. But that's kind of the consensus thinking. But Vale hypothesized that these aliens were shapeshifters and they had actually taken on the persona of the humans, and there really are no humans left. It's all these aliens who have assumed the roles of the humans. So that when that first gets told, it's like, whoa, now we're into something really cool.
Right.
Yeah, and that
And it,
mystery is kind of it is a mystery because we don't actually really know whether that's the case or not, but it's at the heart of the story and all three novellas. And yeah, I don't think it's a spoiler because it's even mentioned on the back of this book in the blurb. uh,
Yeah, you can't really talk about it. Would just you couldn't talk about anything without that, really. Yeah,
yeah, and I I I like the world building in this. It doesn't give a lot away, but I mean, it has like an interesting, I guess, I don't know, economy going about it. So there are slaves on this planet. Um, there's some weird, what his father does, like the way he gets his wealth is kind of hinted about from the boy's perspective. So there's this really interesting world going on that's not, it doesn't seem like a futuristic place to me.
yeah,
What do you guys think?
I agree.
yeah.
Rob?
So on the one hand, it is a futuristic colony world, but yes, it retains some quite sort of regressive qualities. So slavery is part and parcel of life. It's definitely got a kind of colonial feel to it. So French colony world,
Yeah.
uh,
Mhm.
and yeah, it's not exactly the kind of society I think any of us would really want to live in.
No,
Yes. Yep.
and the title of it, the fifth head of Cerberus. Cerberus is the three-headed dog that guards hell to make sure that no one can leave hell. And so there's definitely like this symbology, and if you keep that in mind while
Right.
you're reading the book, it kind of
Yeah.
enlightens the story a bit.
Yeah. So the I think the address or the name of the building that his father lives in and he lives in. It starts with 666.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So yeah, there are a lot of symbolism to hell there, and it seems like a if you're a slave, it's going to be a bad world to live in. So that yeah, that
And
Cerberus uh, symbol kind of comes into play a lot.
and the house is a brothel, so there's that too.
Yes. And
Yeah,
the father is a kind of mad scientist type,
Yeah.
who
yeah,
is quite mysterious in himself. He's rarely seen. He's quite a detached figure.
yeah. I wasn't going to get into the brothel. I don't know if that's a spoiler or not. I think it doesn't outright say it's a brothel, but I think anyone reading like you know it is. So
Yeah.
I don't know if it's really a spoiler or not, because I think when you're reading it, it's pretty obvious.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the second story, the story of John Marsh. So John
Yeah.
Marsh
So, oh,
is we do see John Marsh a little bit in the first story at the near the end. But yeah, Ira, do you want to go into this one?
yeah. So that's kind of the first time we hear about that Vale's hypothesis. Is John Marsh is supposedly an anthropologist from Earth who is has come to kind of study about this extinct alien race, and he comes to the narrator's house looking for this person who came up with this hypothesis. And we'll get into that later, probably in the spoilers. But he he's a bit in the beginning one, and as you read the other novels, you realize how important it is later. But the second novella in here is called A Story by John V. Marsh. And it's really just kind of this mythical kind of retelling of the story about this supposed alien society. And it's never completely spelled out. You don't know when the timeline of this is. It's written by John Marsh. You know he's investigating this, but
Maybe.
um, yeah, but you don't. Yeah, that's at first. Yeah, that's what you think, and then you realize, like, this is all speculation. No one supposedly has these answers to this, so it's kind of told like a fable, and it gets fairly complicated. There's these two brothers who are kind of the main narrators in a way. And it's really weird how he does the narrative because you will get point of views from each one, but they have some sort of way of like jumping into the mind of the other brother at times, like when they're sleeping or something. It's really hard to understand exactly what's going on at
It's
those
almost kind of
times.
like a dream like feel to it.
Yeah. And it's and so these brothers are going out. They meet these other entities called the Shadow Children, I think is what they're called. And by the time it's an interesting story, but um, after you read the first novella and then you read this, it
Completely
hasn't
different.
it hasn't answered anything, and it does feel completely different, and it's only giving you more questions, really.
Yeah, so this for me was the most challenging of the three stories because I really had no idea what was going on at any point in the second story, I don't think.
Uh,
But yeah,
yeah,
like you
I
said,
agree.
very mythological feel. Yeah, Robin, what were your thoughts on
Um,
that?
yeah, it was quite confusing, a bit of a struggle to get through for me.
Me
Um,
too. Yeah.
but as you say, it does have a kind of dreamlike feel to it. Uh, I think this Sandwalker is the name of the main character in this one, and it is kind of a coming of age tale, and he's he's kind of undergoing some kind of walkabout style ritual. That's about as much as I gleaned from it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think his name was John Sandwalker.
Yes,
I
John
got the
Sandwalker.
feeling I think it said every boy is named John. Is that
Yeah.
right? So yeah, very very strange story. And I'm not. I mean, it's quite difficult to really explain, like just talking about it in a synopsis.
Yeah.
So I mean, with that, I guess let's get straight into the third story. Uh, Robin, you want to go over that one?
Okay, so the third novella is called VRT, and this is presented in a very different style to the previous two. It's it's kind of like an epistolary novel or novella, and so we follow an officer uh, working in a prison or a government official who is reviewing Marsh's case. So Marsh is the anthropologist who we've mentioned already, and so we've got this unnamed security official who is going over all of Marsh's files. Marsh, I don't think it's really a spoiler to say at this point that he's been incarcerated. He's in prison for something. So he's going through his anthropologist's files, various like journal entries, taped recordings of interrogations, and his interviews with the boy that Marsh was working with. And it's narrated in a very fragmented way because the official is basically he just picks up almost at random like a page in his diary, reads it, and it's almost as though he gets bored with it. He closes it and then he does something else, and then he picks up something else, and so it's not none of this is told chronologically. Um, and there's about 100 pages of this, and the reader, while reading this, we're trying to figure out what exactly happened. Why has he been incarcerated? What happened to the boy that he was working with when he was doing anthropological fieldwork, and what is his fate? So this bit is a bit of a puzzle, but I actually really enjoyed this part of the book. It was, I think, my favorite novella of the three. I don't know. What did you think?
Yeah, I thought it was a very engaging story, much more so than the second one. I think between that story and the first, I think I liked this one and the first one about the same for me. Um, but yeah, it like you said, this officer is looking at these pieces of Marsh's his anthropological notes and his prison interviews.
Yeah.
So and it's just pieces here and there of it. We don't get really the whole picture or anything. So it's kind of an engaging mystery in a way, I think. Ira, what do you think?
Yeah, the only thing I'll add to that is there are little scenes dispersed throughout of Marsh actually in prison and what he's going through and, moving from cell to cell. They're kind of messing with him. They give him paper. They're almost wanting to get more information out of him, and so you get a little bit of current timeline
Yeah, see, I wasn't
interspersed.
clear if that was a recording. If was it a diary? Was it or was that like his? Did you see it as like
Um,
that's his actual point of view from that?
I think those are his diary entries. So when he's been given the paper and a candle, he's been writing in prison. So we are reading parts of his prison journal, but we're also reading his anthropological uh, diary from earlier on, and the interviews and the interrogations. And I think all of these things are kind of mixed up together.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
time. Yeah, he and there's some notes from his time on Saint Anne on the other planet when he's out with this boy and he's looking for one of the native aliens. He's that's Marsh is kind of he's kind of a scientist that and his interest is the natives to figure out what they are, if there's any evidence that they ever actually existed or not.
Yeah, and I like this one quite a bit. It does provide answers probably to some things in a weird roundabout way. Um, Definitely, overall, this is just definitely a book that no one's going to probably understand on the first read through.
Yeah,
And even in 30 read throughs, there's communities of people that dedicate their lives to reading Gene Wolfe, and there's conflicting theories about this one still to this day. There's no one that has a strong case for what
yeah,
actually is going on.
yeah. There's some interesting questions that come up during this section that uh, we can't really talk about it without spoilers, but it's yeah, some interesting speculation going on.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's written in a really fragmented style, and there's one thing you often hear when people talk about Gene Wolfe, especially those who are really ardently lovers of his work. A lot of his books sort of demand to be reread, right? And I think with this book, if I were to reread it, I would probably try switching the order around. Um, and another thing I'd just like to say about the VRT is the security official is quite an interesting character in his own right, and he's not really a very pleasant character.
I think this story kind of it builds more on the world, so that the actual officer that's like examining these notes, he's on Saint Croix, um, and it's got a we kind of get more information on like how the government's set up and the political situation. So there's this kind of, I mean, it's kind of authoritarian government situation going on this planet. I mean, obviously they're slaves, so and it's John Marsh was arrested. We don't really know why. Maybe it was, well, we do get a little bit more why in the spoilers, but um, is he a political prisoner or did he commit a crime? It's We don't really
Yeah,
get
well,
the answers to that until later.
the thing is, the one thing I really like about this VRT is that the security official doesn't really seem to care. Like he's unlocking the mystery, going through all of the notes, but it's almost like he doesn't really care whether Marsh is guilty or innocent or what the truth actually is. He's just going through the motions.
Yeah, and there's some comedy in there. He asks them some bizarre questions about, society and some other things that are pretty comical in a way, in a weird way.
So yeah, we get a little more of the history of the two planets and how kind of humanity colonized it in this particular section. So that was kind of interesting. And it's kind of hinted, I think, throughout like there may be two waves of colonists. The first one may be a French. So like this government, this kind of style, I think is like it's like a French colony type of style. So and there's hinted that there was maybe a second wave, and did they land on Saint Anne and get replaced by natives, or did they kill off all the natives, or maybe the natives never actually existed at all? So
Hmm.
yeah, there's a lot to dig into. So I think that kind of sums up those three stories. Before we get into spoilers, I mean, what did you guys like the novel overall? I mean, did you like it? Did you not like it? How do you feel about it overall?
Uh,
Robin?
okay, yes, I did enjoy it overall. I Yeah, it can be a bit of a confusing read, and I think as we've agreed with Brandon that the second story is quite confusing, and I struggled a bit with that. I wouldn't say among the Gene Wolfe books I've read it's my favourite, but I do appreciate it for what it is. I think it's a very cleverly constructed piece of work. There is some beautiful writing in there. It's If you like kind of puzzle box type novels where you're trying to piece together what's going on, I think you might enjoy this novel. Um, And as I've already said, I really like what he did with the third novella. I felt that was quite innovative, quite a fresh approach to storytelling. And it does make me keen to read the Book of the New Sun because although I have read a few Wolfe books before, I haven't actually got around to that series yet. So overall, I liked it, but I wouldn't say I loved it.
So the other Wolf books you read, were they as challenging as this one? Would you say?
They varied a little bit. So um, he wrote a, a series. Trying to remember what they're called now. The Soldier of the Mist. That's the first book in a trilogy, a historical fantasy series, and that's one of my all-time favorite fantasy series. Uh, a little bit challenging to get through because it's got another very unreliable narrator, which seems to be a consistent thing with his work. I read another novel of his called Peace, which is the one he wrote after The Fifth Head of Cerberus, which is also quite a challenge, quite ambiguous in some ways. I think I enjoyed this one a little bit more than that one.
Okay.
Yeah, but not as much as Soldier of the Mist and its sequels.
Ira, what are your thoughts on this one?
I really like this one. I'd probably just give this one like 4 stars. I think if I read it a little bit more, it could maybe end up being a 5-star read. I think, um, I've
Okay.
read the Book of the New Sun and gleaned some of what's there. I know this is a very similar book style wise to the Book of the New Sun, but it's a lot shorter. You don't have to invest as much time and try to keep as many things going in your head. But I'd heard ahead of time that this is kind of a good warm up if you're gonna maybe go read Book of the New Sun, and I can see how people would recommend checking this one out first. Like Robin said, his prose is really good. There'd be times where I would read a sentence and say, he messed that up. There should have been a comma in there, and this is a run-on sentence. And I read it like 3 times, and by the end, I'm like, that's the most beautiful sentence I've ever read. So he just has this like unique prose, and even he himself says that he wrote science fantasy because he says he wrote science fiction, but the characters don't really understand the science. And so it could seem like magic to them, and they can't explain a lot of the things that are happening around them. And the couple of the ideas in this one that pop up in the first novella, it hooked me completely. The one we talked about, this hypothesis, and then when we find out about our narrator, what his kind of identity is later in that one, I was hooked. And so the second novella, it was completely different and threw me off a little bit, but I still really enjoyed it. And then the final wrap up was just amazing. It had my head spinning all different directions, and I kind of like that. I couldn't read this kind of stuff all the time, and I know there's people that, like I said, have dedicated, read this book 30 times and have maps of all these things and events. And I don't think I'd ever go that far into this book, but it is a fun style of book to read occasionally.
Yeah, yeah. I think I liked it overall. I think I'm still digesting it, but I probably between a three or 4 stars, somewhere in there. So I did like it. You know, so it's not. I mean, there's no hard sci-fi in this. There's no. It's not a space opera. It's I think we've mentioned it's kind of a mythological retelling. It's a very and Ira, you mentioned his prose. I mean, he's a really great writer. So if you like prose, um, I think you're gonna like this. If I, really like the flow of the words. I mean, even if you don't know what's going on, it's still you're still enjoying the reading experience. I think at least maybe not the second, maybe not the second story, but Um, so yeah, that I like the first one. The second story, the story of John Marsh, I think even though that was the shortest of the three, but it took me the longest to read. So that was a challenge for me. The third one, I also liked. It was a lot more engaging. Um, so it was a 2 out of 3 for me. But then, of course, after you read the third one, I think you get a little bit more context on the second. Um, so maybe, I mean, maybe I need to go back and reread it sometime. But yeah, I liked it overall. So
I didn't mention a star rating, but I would say for me, yeah, I would say it's probably a 3.5 star read. But again, it is the kind of book that if you reflect upon and you think about it, and then you might reassess that later. So I might up it to a 4 star at some point, but it's not quite a 5 star read for me.
yeah, I don't know if I'll ever reassess. I'm not really much of a rereader. So I think if you're a rereader, you probably end up loving this book, maybe. But I'm not much of a rereader, so I don't know if I'll ever go back and change my rating or anything like that. Do you guys reread that often, Ira?
Well, when I was younger, I refused to really reread much, but now I love it, and
Okay.
um, I hope to be a rereader the rest of my reading life because it's so interesting when you read something, especially for me being older. Like I've read books 25 years ago and reread them, and depending on where you are in life, you can get so many different things out of books, and it can feel. And actually, if it's been long enough, you might even have forgotten most of it. So.
What about you, Robin? Do you reread?
Yeah, I agree with what Iris said. I mean, for me, there's my list of books which I haven't read yet is so long that I have to really, really,
Yeah,
really want
exactly.
to reread something for So yeah, I think if it's something where I think it's like a 5 star read or something that I knew I really enjoyed in the past, then yes, I will reread. But I don't do it that often. Maybe once or twice a year, I'll reread a book.
And this is a unique one in that, if you waited too long and reread it, you might not have the
Might forget
benefit
about it.
remembering enough. So, I've thought about I've done this recently. Like last month, I finished a book, and then a week later, I reread it because I was so confused by it. And I've thought about this one too, like just turning around while it's fresh in my mind and giving it another read. But I'm still not set on doing that.
Yeah. All right. So I think that about wraps it up for this section. So from here we'll go into the spoilers, kind of speculation. So if you don't want any spoilers, stop the video here or skip to the end. Or so yeah, from here on we'll go spoilers. So for this spoiler section, we'll start out. What do you guys think? Should we go one by one for each story, or just kind of go overall spoilers? Or
I think we could easily kind of talk about the first novella and some of the things that happen, at least at the end. There's a couple events that are pretty important
Yeah, I mean,
to start.
yeah, if you can spoil the second story, because I still don't really know what happened, so feel free to
So,
spoil it. Yeah,
yeah, so, the big thing that you learn I think, I'll start it off. Mr. Million is a robot, and, they
yeah,
talk about
this
him
is yeah
rolling around
this
in
is
the
the
beginning.
first story. Yeah, the first story, the fifth head of Cerberus.
Yeah. And so that's a little odd, and that's science fiction. And then you find out his dad, some of his mad scientist skills are involve cloning, and that our narrator is a clone of him. So the more you dig into it, the more you do find that the story is science fiction. Um,
Right. Yep.
it's just told in such a outside perspective that
Well, yeah, I think, and because of the perspective is kind of a young boy, he doesn't understand what he's seeing. So
Yep.
then we don't understand.
Yep.
Yeah. And like we don't, it doesn't really reveal that Mr. Million is a robot until, at least halfway through the story. And then you're like, whoa, this guy's a,
Hmm.
this guy's a robot. And not only that, he's a simulation of his great grandfather. Well, but it's like a clone great grandfather, not like your
Yep.
typical great grandfather. Um,
Yeah, and his aunt, she gives some hints about, because there's these numbers, what the fifth head of Cerberus is, and there's some speculation, but at one point, she's looking at him, trying to determine what iteration of clone he is from the original one.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's revealed his aunt is came up with Vale's hypothesis. His aunt is Vale,
Yep.
Yes.
and yeah, so I
And
guess the main boys referred to as number five. So who do you? I mean, what do you guys think? What number five is he? Is he the fifth? It's never really clear why he's called number five. What do you think, Robin?
That is a bit of a mystery to me. I mean, this is the name that his father designates him. If I remember the scene correctly, his father asks him how he should be called, and he says his name, although we don't actually find out what his name is. And then he says, "No, you're number five," and that's basically the only name we get for him. Um, Now, maybe either of you two can shed some light on that, because that was just a bit of a mystery to me.
Ira, what do you think about number five?
well, at one point in the book, they said, what was it? The three were Mr. Million.
The three heads of Cerberus.
Yes.
Yeah. And so it was Mr. Million, the father, and Vale, right? And
Yes,
His
and
aunt.
yeah,
and then yeah, and then so when they say that, then it makes you think maybe the brother was four and the narrator was five.
right.
But then later there's some more information where like when I mentioned like his aunt is trying to determine which version he is, which kind of
Which
makes that
clone? Yeah,
seem different, yeah, off or something.
yeah.
So
So I kind of wondered that. Yeah, is he the fifth clone? And
mhm.
and maybe the first four were a failed attempt.
Or the fifth successful one because he goes around and sees people that look like him in
Yep.
town.
Yeah,
As
he
slaves. Yep.
he goes to the slave market, and he sees a slave who basically he realizes has his likeness, and we realize how much cloning is really going on in this world.
Yeah.
And there's one, I think, for me, the most memorable scene in the first novella is when he comes into contact with a slave in the mansion who has been surgically implanted with an extra pair of arms. That was a
Yeah.
weird scene, wasn't it?
That
And he's guarding a box.
yeah, some kind of treasure box. Did they ever actually break into that box? Like, can't remember if we see what's in it.
I don't think so, but they ended up in a kind of conflict with this four-armed slave, and I think they ended up killing him, if I remember
Hmm.
correctly.
Yep.
Yep.
Stabbed
Yeah,
him in the neck, right?
Yep.
yeah.
So
Um,
yeah, I mean, there's some cloning and what I don't know if you call that genetic engineering or biological engineering. So there's
yeah. So
So the
I
box, I have a bit of a hypothesis real quick on the box, that it could be, we're full on spoilers now, I guess. So
yep, yep.
I have a theory, and I haven't really dug deep. This could be very common knowledge that this box is all the evidence that the inspector was going through in the final novella.
It could be. Yeah. Because yeah, the time of the third story, the with the officer, that was, I think, after the events of the first story, right? The
That
officer's
was
perspective.
before, isn't it?
No, because it's
Yeah,
suggested that Marsh was arrested for the murder of
right.
the father.
But a lot of the evidence he's going over was from before. Yeah.
Yeah,
So you
yeah,
get,
yeah. I'm
yeah,
talking like just the officer's perspective. Like his
right.
perspective is
Well,
after the first story.
the
But
thing is, we don't know since, as Ira has already established, the first novella was published separately, and then Wolfe was suggested to extend the story. So I'm assuming when he first wrote that first novella, he didn't yet conceive of this wider part of the story. But maybe he did. We don't really know that. So this box which appears in the first story may not be related, or it could be. It's just we'll never know, will we?
yeah, it's layers upon layers of.
Yeah.
And then, so back to number five. So he also goes under these. They're described as hypnagogic sessions. It's like kind of hypnotizing therapy with
Yeah.
his father. And
So
I took that to be his father was imprinting his mind onto the clone. That's kind of how I took it. What about you, Robin?
as I mentioned earlier, and I hope it wasn't really meant to be a spoiler, but I said his father was a kind of mad scientist type. So obviously he's working in cloning, and he is doing these experiments, quite cruel experiments, on his son. And I'm not sure exactly what he's doing, but he seems to be experimenting on his mind. And as we progress through the story, we learn that number five is going through increasingly severe bouts of amnesia as a result of this experimentation. And this is probably part of the reason why he increasingly resents his father, and he goes on to kill him, which is kind of like the climax of the first story. And he's subsequently sent to a labor camp after killing his father, and that's kind of where we finish up the first novella.
Is
Yeah.
it
And like
suggested? Yeah, go ahead,
what
Ira.
Brandon said, I agree with what you were talking about, how he was almost trying to implant memories because he was at one point on that like ship and he had never been on a ship before, but everything like seemed familiar, like it was almost like deja vu to him. And it was almost like they were imprinting memories from previous versions of clones into his mind to be the next clone in a way.
And it's kind of suggested at the end of that story that every every new iteration of this person, we never get his name, but he ends up the same. And he's like the whole reason his father's doing this thing, doing these experiments on his clone, is he's trying to figure out like how to change that pattern or like why he is the way he is. So, did you guys get the feeling that his father went through kind of the same scenario that the clone is now? Did his father kill his father?
He mentioned that he had those same feelings. I don't think he said if he did it or not, but as the narrator comes in to kill him, he says, I had, he explains this whole the same exact scene again. So yeah.
Yeah, although it doesn't actually explicitly say that, I did kind of get that impression that there is a kind of circular narrative going on, and it also adds to this whole vibe of the story that this world that they live in is quite sort of static. They doesn't seem to progress. They seem to be stuck in a regressive colonial uh, state with where they've got slavery, and the Aboriginals whether they're real or not, because we're not really sure, or where they came from, who they are. They're kind of this mythic backdrop, which I suppose give the colonists a sense of history, a sense of their place in the world. But you kind of get the impression that this colony that they live in is not really progressing anywhere, and this whole human cloning story surrounding number 5 feels like a kind of cyclical narrative, possibly.
Yeah.
There's certainly a lot of hints at that.
Yeah. And during this final scene with number 5 and his father, John Marsh is in the room, right? And which I presume is why he ends up getting arrested, because he was kind of seen as maybe an accomplice. And so there's an interesting conversation between the boy and John Marsh before this happens. And the boy suggests that Marsh is one of the natives.
He's trying to get rid of him so he can kill his dad. And and then he accuses him of being an Aboriginal, and you don't know if he's doing that to just try to get rid of him or what, but it seems like it ends up working. So the reader has a lot to unpack about from every point of view. What led to him leaving the room, what led the narrator to accuse him of this. All of this is very interesting.
Yeah, and there's the question, was John Marsh a native at that time? Was he one of the Annies or the Aboriginals? Or is he a human? What do you guys think?
I think the third story, VRT, suggests that he is who he says he was, i.e., an anthropologist sent from Earth. But that's not the official account, or that's not what the authorities believe. They think he's lying. But I don't think there's any further suggestions that he might be a native. Not that I can remember, anyway.
There are in the third story.
Oh, okay. Maybe I forgot. Or I overlooked that bit.
Yeah, when the kid dies, that could have been the time he switched.
I think that John Marsh was one of the natives, one of the shapeshifters. That's my.
You think so?
Yeah. I mean, it talks about like he's got a beard and his skin's all pale. Like, I don't think he's human. But I mean, we can get into that a little more on the third when we talk about the third section.
Then the other thing about the first one is there's a scene where he's talking about how his dad wrote so many books, and he would go to the library and he was reading old science fiction, and he was talking about finding one of his dad's books after he doesn't say Kate Wilhelm, but it's The Mile Long Spaceship by some German
I think
author.
Werner Vinge is mentioned by name.
And then he mentions Werner Vinge was miscatalogued with the V's, I mean the W's instead of the V's. And so that had me thinking, and there is a theory out there that all the clones are Gene Wolfe.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't really like that theory. I mean, maybe that's what the intention was, but that's kind of if he wrote himself as a character, that's kind of silly, I think. But
Well, so there are a lot of people that say, there's nothing in his stories that don't play some sort of part to the overall story. He doesn't just throw something in as filler, that everything has some sort of little meaning. So there's a lot of people that ran with that and think that I think Wolfe wrote himself into the story.
So let's moving on to the second story, the story by John Marsh. You guys have any speculation here? This one's hard to speculate on because it's so challenging. I guess maybe you can start out with this one, Ira. Who wrote the story of John Marsh?
Well, so I have the definitive answer in an interview I heard from Gene Wolfe, but I wasn't sure when I read it, and after I finished it and thought about it, I wasn't sure. And the actual mythic story that's told through it, um, I don't know exactly how that fits in. That would take some really another like go around of reading and trying to figure out if there's any hints in there. But it seems like it's just some sort of telling of the um, our natives of that planet and when the humans came or whatever. But before I tell you what Wolf said, you guys can speculate and see.
I have no idea who who wrote it, but I have seen that. I read that Gene Wolfe sometimes would give different answers to the same question in interviews. So
Oh,
that's
well, that
something
helps.
Yeah.
because he kind of wanted to keep it ambiguous. So
Well,
what
and
what
and so even like it almost doesn't matter because like you can't trust Marsh really. Like, I don't know. You get into some circular logic thinking this through, but in this interview I found, and people can go look it up. It's called Gene Wolfe KPFA radio interview 1982, and it's not that long, but about I think 8 minutes into it, someone asks him about this story, and they just say, okay, well, so the second novella is written by John Marsh. Now, were you writing John Marsh as how he saw this, or was this you writing as Gene Wolfe of how you envisioned this? And he goes, well, you got both of those wrong. He's like, it was actually VRT who had taken
right?
over John
Yeah,
Marsh and
yeah.
was telling the story in the second novella.
It's John Marsh as a shapeshifter writing the story. Maybe.
Hmm.
Interesting.
And then, I mean, there were some kind of, I mean, if you read through that story, there are some hints kind of more about the natives. There's like talk of trees. To me, like, there's one part that I kind of felt like their original form was a tree. Did anyone else feel like that? Like they can take like any form basically, but I feel like their
Okay.
original one is like, or maybe they're in form. I don't know. Is a tree.
I know they could become like anything in their surroundings, including trees and stuff. But yeah, I didn't think of that.
Robin, do you have any thoughts, any
Yeah,
speculations on
I
this?
honestly, I don't remember that bit, the reference to trees. But like I said, a lot of that second novella kind of went over my head a little bit. Um,
Yeah, there's
Yeah.
a part where it's talking like the birth of John Sandwalker, like involving a tree, and then there's some mentions of like there's some kind of a temple that they go to, and it's like a circle of trees. So there's some mentions of trees here and there,
and
but
does
yeah,
anyone
it's really not clear at all.
does anyone have any theory or idea who the Shadow Children are or what they're supposed to be? No?
That's a tough one.
Yeah, I mean, they could be the shapeshifters, they could be the original colonists, or maybe a hybrid mix of shapeshifter and colonists. Maybe I don't know.
Um, but I mean, there are several different groups or entities that get referred to within this story, and we've got like the hill dwelling people,
Yeah,
Aboriginals,
the
the
marsh
marsh dweller,
people.
who I think are cannibals, aren't they? The marsh,
Hmm.
the marsh
Yeah,
people, and then you've got the Shadow Children.
yeah, and then you've got the French colonists who showed up. So
Yeah. Oh yeah, the
yeah,
French
I mean,
colonists. Yeah.
yeah, it's not
And I
clear if they're talking about like the original colonists or is this like a different races of the natives.
and somewhere in there, it's kind of implied that they had some sort of like shield over this planet in a way. so that no other alien race compared to them could find it. And then for some reason that was released and
Yeah, I
opened
didn't
up,
get
and that's
I didn't get that part at all.
and I thought the Shadow Children had something to do with that.
Okay. Yeah, this was a challenging
Yeah.
story
Yeah.
for sure.
Especially when you don't have and that's why it would be such an interesting reread, because if you don't have the context of everything else, when you're reading this, it reads like a fable, and it's kind of interesting, but I'm sure he's dropping hints throughout this thing.
Oh yeah. So moving on to VRT, what's your guys' speculations on that? So yeah, this is the one where the notes of John Marsh among the natives, and he meets a young native boy.
Can I, can I go back one more time though?
Yeah,
Because
yeah, go ahead.
when Gene Wolfe this is something I thought about. I forgot to mention this. When he stated in that video that VRT had taken over John Marsh. There's two theories really on this. One is that he was a shapeshifter and took him over biologically. There's another option that he just assumed his role as a anthropologist, and he was just assuming his personality and his persona after that, just without any kind of shape shifting going on. So when
Okay.
Gene Wolfe says that, at first I thought, aha, that's like the answer. But then you think about it more, and there's a whole nother theory that these shapeshifters aren't technically taking over people's body; they're just changing people, or So I don't know. I just wanted to clarify that
Yeah,
it's as definitive as it sounds.
and so the boy that the assistant to Marsh, his it's kind of implied that he's half shapeshifter, half human. His dad is a human, and his mom is one of the shapeshifters. So, I mean, I wonder. I'd probably go with the theory that not that he completely shapeshifts into John Marsh, but he just kind of becomes him. Like he grows a beard, and it's. I think there's a scene in there where the boy is talking to John Marsh, and he's able to change his voice and kind of
Mhm.
impersonate people. So
Yeah.
I'd wonder if he murdered John Marsh, or maybe John Marsh just died. I don't know. And this assistant BRT uh, kind of takes over his profession and kind of acts like he is John Marsh.
And at this point, we should say that according to Marsh's journal, as is presented uh, in the third story, VRT, who is the boy, who is his kind of assistant, dies. Um, I forget his manner of death now.
He falls
Kind of like
off a cliff climbing a
Yeah.
waterfall, I think,
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. That's it. So
according to the journal.
yeah, according to the journal. So as you can see, this account that we're presenting now does conflict with the journal as presented
Right.
in
But
the
Mhm.
it
third
could
story.
be that John Marsh dies. VRT, which I think stands for Victor R. Trenchard, is his name. But VRT takes over John Marsh and then writes these notes in. So he writes the
Yeah.
notes that he died, but like he just made that up, maybe.
Mhm. But there's some a conflicting thing there in that Marsh says he got bit by that cat, and now all of a sudden he's having issues writing because apparently these Aborigines couldn't write well. They couldn't
Right?
use
They
their
couldn't.
hands
Yeah, they
very
couldn't use
well
tools very
and
well.
tools. And so this would confirm the idea that he actually did shapeshift into him, and then he made up a story that he all of a sudden couldn't write as well. So like you just don't know what to
Yeah.
Yeah.
believe.
Actually, I think that sounds a bit more credible than, a cat bit his hand and now he can no longer write very well for the rest of his life.
Yeah,
That does sound
yeah,
a bit more credible.
And it's kind of implied
yeah.
that the cat itself is a shapeshifter.
Hmm.
Like is because VRT he like kind of gets a maybe a like a girlfriend of one of the shapeshifters, and maybe it's the cat.
Yeah, there's some weird stuff going on.
And there are moments where so John Marsh is like going through with his hunting rifle, and he's shooting animals, and he'll shoot an animal, and the boy VRT will sit down and start crying. So is he shooting? Is he shooting the native shapeshifters? What do you guys think, Robin?
That is an interesting thought, and to be honest, it hadn't occurred to me until you just mentioned it. But I think, yeah, that does kind of make sense in light of what we've just been saying. I think that that's probably uh, an interesting way to interpret it, and I think you're definitely adding some credence to that theory.
What do you think, Ira? Was he shooting? Was he shooting the shapeshifters?
Yeah, I'd have to think about that one.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about that idea of the cat might be his shape-shifting girlfriend because we learned from Marsh's journal that he keeps on saying he suspects that VRT is having relations with a girl he never actually sees or hears,
Right,
but he just seems to know it with no
right.
evidence at all. Now this cat, and also he ends up killing the cat, and you think, well, why did he kill the cat? But I think, yeah, if we take in that possibility that the cat might have been a shape shifting Aboriginal girlfriend,
So
then yeah, that could work, I suppose.
so I guess, and then if you take those as theories as what's happening, John Marsh was killing the shapeshifters. Maybe VRT got mad at him and murdered him. But how do you think John Marsh died, or if you do even think that he died and got replaced? What do you think, Ira?
Well, I mean, I would lean pretty heavily to that he died and he was either taken over biologically or just in, you know, the role he was playing by VRT.
So was he murdered, or did he die from? Because it's mentioned there are some animals that he's chasing, like kind of a tiger animal and a.
At one point, they had all kinds of animals following them. They were like, they had like um, the cats, and then there was like, was it a boar or something?
Some kind of a bear or boar or something, yeah.
Uh, they had all kinds of things chasing after him, and you know, I think that yeah, I mean, it's such an unreliable narration. If maybe VRT pushed him off of a cliff and either took his took his persona or shapeshifted into him somehow during that and just used that in the journal.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah,
Or
or
yeah.
yeah, or he, Marsh could have been killed through natural causes by
Yeah.
one of these animals, and VRT just simply assumed his identity,
Yeah.
which
But
you know,
when you read those journal entries, because there's a few in a row, and it's all kind of reading the same, and then all of a sudden the next entry was like, "Well, the boy died," and then it feels a little different. And I went back and like read it again, a couple of those, and it seemed to me that Wolfe was trying to imply that this was the change, this was the moment where someone was impersonating him, but
Yeah.
it's not definitive, that's for sure. So I will say, in that interview, also Gene Wolfe is kind of asked about this, and he said VRT is half Albo. His mom is full Albo. His father was human. His mom completely changed her chemistry into human, which allowed her to have children, but it's like implied that she morphed into a human so much she couldn't shapeshift anymore. She actually became a human. But since VRT is half, there could, it leaves the door open that maybe he still had this ability or something. I don't. Even when Gene Wolfe answers something, it's not
Yeah,
clear.
yeah. Like I said, he'll give different answers to the same question.
And in that interview, he also mentioned he's like, "Oh, I haven't read the book in like 8 years," so
Yeah.
like he was acting like he didn't remember it perfectly. So
So the officer reviewing these notes, do you think he ever suspected anything, or did he just not care?
He doesn't seem to care.
yeah, I got the impression, like Robin mentioned, he was so nonchalant about this stuff. He would just randomly pick pieces of evidence and get bored with it, and it's like he just had this job he was supposed to do, and even in the end, like, yeah, nothing is resolved, right?
And I realized that the outcome, what is Marsh or VRT, the boy who's been put in prison, his ultimate fate is basically a political choice. It's not based on evidence or whether he's innocent or guilty of
Right.
what he's been charged with.
Yeah.
It's just whatever's politically convenient for the colony.
Right.
Yeah.
How is it going to um, how is it going to appeal or appear, I should
Yeah, they
say,
want.
to the public?
Do
Yeah.
they want to make an example of him? I think they even said.
And there are some journal entries about Marsh in the prison, and he's like communicating with the other prisons through like knocking on the wall with codes. I'm sure there's probably some kind of double meaning there. Did you guys get anything from those scenes? I didn't, but I'm surely there's something.
Um, it's kind of suggested that his communication with the other prisoners was that they were kind of, I'm not sure if they were planted there, but they were encouraged by the authorities to communicate with him as a way of you know building up more evidence so
Yeah, yeah,
he can gain their trust and perhaps reveal things that he wouldn't reveal otherwise in his journals.
Yeah, and then there was like the psychological element where they put him in the dungeon for a while, and then they brought him back up to his original room, which seemed like a penthouse suite after he'd been in the
Oh,
dungeon.
that
And then
dungeon
they tried.
sounded horrific.
It
It's like
still sounded
he
bad.
is.
I was like happy about it,
Didn't they
and
say
then
that?
they tried to get him to like admit to something while he was like high on life.
The dungeon, I think, was described as being about the ceiling was like 1 meter up, so he can't even stand up in the dungeon. There's no windows, so he has no like natural light at all. It
yeah.
sounds pretty
I
hellish.
didn't catch that he couldn't stand up.
Yeah, he's given some matches and some candles, but he uses them sparingly, and he's writing some stuff down. He in this section too, like there's even a time where he admits in one of the journal entries that I was lying in the last journal, and then he burns some of his journal entries while he's in the dungeon. So like,
Yeah,
everything is suspect that is said.
yeah. So I guess pulling this back around to Vale's hypothesis. What do you guys think about the natives? Are they extinct? Did they never exist? Have they replaced all the humans? Ira, what do you think?
I don't think I know enough to make an accurate prediction at this point. I know that there's from the larger community that study this thing, there's like three big hypotheses that are out on this one, and you know, and everyone can contradict everyone on it. So I don't think anyone has the answer. I don't know if this story was even told to have a definitive answer by the time you get to the end of it. So, I mean, it makes you really think. And Wolfe crafts quite the story here. I couldn't imagine trying to write something like this. Um, but yeah, I couldn't tell you.
What do you think, Robin, about the natives?
Um, I honestly don't know, and I think the you've given me more ideas tonight or more possible interpretations about what was going on here. Uh, I think the Veils hypothesis is very intriguing, but the thing is, it's untestable. It's not. It can't be proven or disproven.
Right.
Um, so we can only really guess. I mean, I part of me thinks, well, it's possible that the uh, the Aborigines are just they never really existed. It's a kind of mythic construct, but that also seems a little bit unlikely. But it's certainly possible within the framework of the story.
Yeah, I think I'm kind of I feel like the natives do exist and they've taken over some people. That's kind of my thinking. They're kind of spread throughout the population. It like, and I read this online after I finished. When there's some entries about Marsh or VRT when he got arrested. One of the soldiers, or I guess they're not even really soldiers; they're just government officials. One of them has like a scar on his head, and some people online have said when the shape shifting happens, there's scarring. So maybe this guy was this at least this one guy was a shapeshifter. So they're they could be integrated into the human population.
So, like classic conspiracy theory.
Uh,
Yep.
I,
Yep.
I will say the kind of theory that I like the most, and I don't think we've talked about it. There's a theory out there that the family in the first one are the only real humans left, and that's why they've resorted to cloning, because they could just shapeshift if they were shapeshifters, they wouldn't need to
Yeah.
clone, and that everyone else on both of the planets are all the aliens that have taken over. And to what
That's,
level that is, if they've completely lost, if they've shapeshifted 100% to where, it's like this idea of identity is throughout the whole book. And if they could impersonate humans and take them over completely, then are they humans or are they aliens
yeah.
impersonating humans? But
Right.
yeah,
Yeah. Does it even if you can't tell a difference, doesn't matter kind of
does it
thing.
matter? Yeah.
Yeah, that's
But
interesting.
I do like that idea. It makes sense to me, but I haven't like, I'd have to, but you get your bias. I like the way that side of the story would go, where the clones are the last humans. And so then if I read through it, I would just be looking for evidence that supports
Yeah.
my case. So, yeah.
Yeah, and then another thing like the how the shapeshifters are bad with tools, that could maybe explain why society hasn't progressed because they can't build anything.
Yeah,
Hmm.
that would make sense.
Yeah, definitely an interesting read, though.
A good pick for a buddy read, I think, or any kind of
For
book
sure.
discussion.
For sure.
Yeah, we could probably reread this once a year and do another discussion for probably like 20 years and keep evolving our
Yeah.
ideas.
Yeah. I mean, of course, people online have, in forums and whatnot, they've discussed this over and over again. So,
Well, Gene Wolfe is, you know, a really great author for this kind of thing. I can also like I've read some Christopher Priest and I get a little bit of the same feeling with him because as soon as you think you figure something out and you're getting excited, someone can come along and disprove your theory sometimes. And then Jack Vance is compared to Wolfe a lot. And I don't think, from what I've read of Vance, he doesn't put as many puzzles, but he has that prose and that kind of science fantasy thing going on. But
Can I just say,
Uh,
I read a book recently which um, felt quite similar to this in a way, in that it's a kind of puzzle box of a novel, and it's a Japanese novel called 10 Billion Days and 100 Billion Nights. I think that's what it's called, yeah, by Ryu Mitsuse. And I was thoroughly confused after reading that book, but I still enjoyed it. And then I looked up some online discussion afterwards, and like Gene Wolfe, it's the kind of book where it kind of almost demands to be reread. And there are lots of different theories going on around, and um, yeah. So these two books so far, among the things I've read this year, have definitely been the most challenging.
And I think with Gene Wolfe also, I mean, we talking here today, we have the benefit that these stories have been out for 20 years and people have already talked about it. And we have the benefit of the introductions. I mean, if you were reading these for the first time with everybody else, no one had talked about it online, there aren't any introductions. I mean, I think you could really spend a lot of time talking about it.
yeah, I think there was when like John Clute, because this is in the 100 best novels, um, or I mean, not John Clute. John Clute is the
Uh, David Pringle.
yeah, David Pringle, and then John Clute with the encyclopedia. They both love this book, but on when it came out, and originally it just came out as the novella, so and it was actually I have a copy of it. It came out in Orbit 10
Okay, well,
by
awesome.
edited by Damon Knight as just the novella, and so that's what people read first, and then the actual novel came out after that. So people had their theories then, but I mean, it's still going today, and this is like 50 years later. People are still coming up with new ideas and how to interpret this, and so there's a lasting joy to this, to Gene Wolfe and this one in particular.
Yeah.
Not many other authors or novels that I can think of that stand up like that for so long.
So, you guys have any final speculations, final thoughts on this one?
I would say I'm not sure if this is the kind of book that's going to appeal to everyone. And if you look at the reviews on Goodreads, it is quite divisive. But that isn't the nature of Gene Wolfe. The people who love him absolutely adore his writing and will happily reread it again and again and again. I'm not sure if I really fall into that camp, but I still really enjoyed it. And if you really appreciate the kind of books which don't give you straight answers, that are kind of like puzzle boxes that you need to think about to interpret, then you will definitely enjoy this novel. And as I just said, it works very well for group discussion. So if you're doing a kind of book group, for example, I think this would be a great choice, because you can see we've been discussing this quite a long time now, and it's a really fascinating book, I think.
Yeah, well said. Yeah, I agree with everything there. You got any final thoughts, Ira?
No, I think Robin summed that up really good. This is a great one if you have like a book club and you want to have some really good discussion and throw your theories out and everything. This is a book that lends itself perfectly to something like that. And don't my only advice would don't, struggle to find the answers. Go along for the ride, enjoy it. You'll get these moments where things make sense and you're starting to feel like you're enjoying it a little bit more, and then you'll get confused again, but just go with it, and it can be fun.
Yep. Yeah, and so I haven't read the Book of the New Sun. I think neither of you guys have, right?
I have
Oh,
I
you
read
have.
it when I was younger, and this was before Goodreads or anything, and I just picked them up off the shelf completely blind. I like the covers, and I read all four of them, and I know enough now that I missed pretty much everything on my first reread.
Yeah, I haven't read it. I have this. this collection. It's got all the first four of
Oh,
them in this
all in one
hardcover.
volume. Nice.
Yep.
Yeah.
So
I'm
So,
gonna be rereading it like next month, maybe. I'm gonna go all through, all straight in a row. That's my plan. If I can do it.
I
yeah, I
uh,
don't. Go ahead, Robin.
so I was just saying I did actually listen to the Shadow of the Torture on audiobook a few years back, and I didn't go any further. And I'm not really sure if that is the best way to experience Gene Wolfe. Um, and I didn't enjoy it as much as some of his other stuff. But I do plan to read the full series at some point, maybe next year. And I've got these lovely Bruce Pennington illustrated covers which I picked up.
Yeah,
Uh,
those are awesome.
and so, yeah, I do intend to read the Book of the New Sun. But so far, this remains my favorite Gene Wolfe book, Lapture in the Mist, which is a duology. It's a collection of Soldier of the Mist and Soldier of Areti, which is a kind of historical fantasy set in ancient Greece. And in those novels, it's also got an extremely unreliable narrator who is suffering from severe amnesia. So he keeps a journal. Um, every day he has to reread his journal to remind himself of who he is, and then he just instantly forgets everything. Uh, so, but in kind of in compensation for this, he has a unique ability to see and hear the gods, which most people can't see. That's the basic premise. It's quite an interesting premise. And then later on, he wrote a sequel to those two called Soldier of Sidon, which is set in ancient Greece, but it's the same character. So yeah, I really enjoyed this trilogy. I'll probably reread it at some point, but first up, I've got to read Book of the New Sun.
Awesome. I think we're getting pretty long now, hour and a half in. So if you've stuck around this far in the video, thanks thanks for
Yeah.
sticking it out to all the viewers there. And yeah, I think if you haven't subscribed, go ahead check out Robin and Ira's channel. I'll of course link them below in the description. I'm sure probably most people watching this channel probably already subscribed to you guys, but if you haven't, go ahead and give them a look. So yeah, thanks for joining me. Ira, any
Yeah,
parting?
we should do it again, and maybe even throw Bart in the mix as well. He
Yep.
I'm sure he'll be happy to join us.
All right. Well, thank you guys.
Thank you. See you
Thanks.
soon.